Dr. Victor Sergey Liddell was a team leader for a WHO humanitarian response team during the 2014 Ebola outbreak in Nigeria. And he has a really powerful vision of how cognitive technology could be used to improve outcomes in crisis response. And Dave, did you want to add anything about how you met with him?
I do. How did you know? Many of you might know that I was not originally from Oklahoma City, and I moved here about 4 years ago, and I really fell in love with the city, and mostly I think because of the people and sort of feeling of excitement of really wanting to build a community like this, and being able to sort of get in at the beginning of what felt like a lot of changes with Oklahoma City and with Innovation District, and just found it to be an incredibly welcoming place. And Victor is in a similar situation, and now it's sort of interesting for me to be on the other side of that. Like when I got here, I remember people saying, "Oh, we're glad you're here. We want you to stay." and so Victor's been here not even 6 months, I don't think. I moved because my wife got a job at the University of Oklahoma. Victor moved because his wife got a job at the University of Oklahoma Health Science Center. She's a doctor in pediatrics. And he did something very similar to what I did when I got here, which was trying to network. Okay, now I'm here. Who am I going to talk to? And so he reached out to me, and we just had a great conversation. From our initial conversation, and I remember thinking, having this conversation, and half of my brain is just thinking about the conversation, and the other half of my brain is just thinking awesome, Oklahoma got another awesome person that maybe didn't expect to move here, and now we gotta keep him here and engage him and leverage all the sort of expertise that he brings. And I'm really hopeful that he's gonna find the same sort of experience for him that I found here, that this is really fertile ground for his ideas to take hold, and he's gonna find a lot of thought partners here. Actually, I like what Joe said. They won't just spread his ideas, but we'll actually try and help them do that. I think that's really nice. So I'll turn it over there.
Hi everyone. It's very nice to meet you. Nice to be here. There's something Dave didn't add. I think it's worthwhile that I share. I must have reached out to him. We were introduced by a mutual friend, and I emailed him. I had almost 10 contacts before I got a meeting. Ordinarily, one would be tempted to give up. Not because he was mean, but he was so busy that either he's at the airport about to travel or something, but ordinarily, one would interpret that as this person is not interested in me. But I was about to give up, then I sent him an email, and he responded immediately, meaning that he was interested, but he just didn't have the bandwidth to reply. So I just share that because there is someone here that needs that kind of encouragement. You're reaching out to someone that you think can be your thought partner, the vision builder. Don't be too quick to give up. It may not be about you, it may be about them. You don't have the time to
And don't be too busy either, because I almost missed a really fantastic, opportunity for collaboration by being outside my bandwidth limits. So it works both ways. So yeah.
As I was driving, as I parked in front here, I just couldn't get a thought out of my mind. There's this Dr. Seuss book, All the Places You Go, and I'm just really amazed to be standing in front of you guys and sharing the crowd like this. Just a short 1 or 2 years ago, I never would have imagined doing this. First of all, being in front of a crowd like this, and then second, speaking in public. And yeah, I think it's a big win for me. I'd like you guys to give me a hand. Something I had to overcome because I had a couple of bad experiences in the past where I knew the answer, the solution to these things, and I had something to contribute, but I was too reticent to share, and those moments passed. And unfortunately, they feel like work when the good ideas don't come forward. it's measured not in profits lost, but in lives lost. So I felt really bad about that, and I went on a journey to really get over myself and get over my fear of talking in front of people. Knowing that engaging is necessary, it's a necessary skill for any professional, because you have to get your ideas out there for people to hear them, and then you get the people that will help you turn these things to reality. So there's someone here that needs to also hear that. That's why I shared. So yeah, I'm going to talk, most of my talk will be centered around my experiences during the Ebola response. In 2014, thereabouts, the last Ebola outbreak that lasted for about 2 years was the single largest and deadliest in history of Ebola, and I was involved in that response. And when it hit, it so gripped the attention of the world, like SARS and swine flu before it. The media was suffused with news about Ebola, all kinds of doomsday predictions, and it was like the world was about to end. Even respected authorities like the CDC and Euro Surveillance were predicting that by the end of 2014, there was going to be close to 500,000 new cases. I don't know how you felt in 2014 when this was happening, but then at that time I was living in Texas with my family. I had just come out of close to a decade of working in humanitarian assistance and healthcare crisis and all that around the world. And I really started my career on the front lines. I was an MD and I volunteered for a missionary organization. Then from there, jumped to work with the Nigerian government, and from there, crossed the United Nations system, where I worked with several UN missions and then the World Health Organization. So I was involved in providing care, rebuilding healthcare systems that had been damaged by the war, establishing healthcare systems where there were none, green healthcare programs, catering to refugees, doing surgeries in the field and things like that. But after a while, I was just really convinced that underlying all this crisis and all that were weak healthcare systems. And I wanted to be involved in strengthening this healthcare system so that they are more resilient, such that when there is a crisis, they are more able to withstand the shock and not necessarily require people coming over there to help them do that. So in pursuit of this vision, I went to get an education in management. But the very month I finished my MPA was when Ebola blew up in West Africa. And I felt compelled to return. Just because I felt not too many people had my mix of field experience and skills at that time. So my wife gave me the permission, my family accepted for me to go. So I went to Brussels, and from Brussels I crossed over to Liberia. But one thing I forgot to mention is that each large-scale humanitarian crisis, when it occurs, rips open a gap in what used to be and what comes after. It was my experience during Ebola that the way humanitarian crisis responds and uses data changed very drastically during those 2 years. What used to be before and what used to be after changed, and I'll explain more about, I'll tell you more about that as we go on. So how did it even start? What were the origins of this outbreak? It starts from a town, a village in a small country called Guinea, a boy called Usmani. In this village, there's a certain tree called the kapok tree. And this tree, when it's in bloom, it produces these flowers and fruit that gives us such a pungent odor that attracts a certain kind of insectivorous bat. The locals call it Plospideros. Now the kids, when they're playing under the tree, often they hunt the bat and they hunt them with sticks or with their hands. Usman's sister, older sister, took him there, kept him in the shade of the tree while playing. We don't know exactly what led to what next because Usman was too young to do the bat himself. But a couple of days later, Usman died. Shortly after, his sister too died. followed by their mother and their grandmother. Then the nurse in the hospital where they are, the nearby hospital, the nurse there died, the midwife died, all the people that attended the burials of these people started dying from this mysterious illness in the village. Before the information flow could flow from the village, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Right.
By the time the information flowed from the village up to the capital city and back, telling them what to do, understanding the people were scared and they had fled in all kinds of different directions, taking the illness with them. Because as at that time, no one knew exactly what it was. So Guinea is close to Liberia and Sierra Leone. They share land borders. So those that would flee across, not that they were trying to take it to another country, but don't forget that these countries share affinities. So you have tribes and families living across borders that were arbitrarily drawn earlier in the last century. So it's not like there's a war dividing countries. So it spread from that village in Guinea to the city, to the capital city, then to Liberia, Monrovia, then to Sierra Leone by land, then by jet to the US, to Nigeria, to the UK, to Italy, and to Spain. And before very long, we had a worldwide epidemic on our hands. Let me tell you a bit about humanitarian aid and the way it works. Most of the money is provided by governments, the richer governments of the world, but they do not actually implement. They implement through proxies, and some of the proxies they implement through are usually United Nations agencies and then the larger international NGOs. The UN agencies employ people like me to do the work. We have international NGOs, and we in turn contract some of the work to another set of people, professionals and organizations. Same with international NGOs, and on and on and on and on it goes. So really, a crisis response is actually a hotspot of all kinds of people, and coordination is usually quite a challenge. Now, information is the bedrock of coordination. Before the last 5 years or thereabouts, or let's say 10 years or thereabouts, it used to be a linear flow of information, reports, emails, somebody processes it, and then distributes. But it was my experience with that response that there are more avenues that information gets to us now, from social media, SMS, emails, technical reports. There are all kinds of avenues to receive information, and our processing power has become limited. In the outside world, yeah, it's not a problem because people are very tech savvy. But in the community that I'm a part of, things were not moving that fast. And because of that, there were many bottlenecks. It seriously affected coordination, and as it affected coordination, it affected the response. But my career beginnings on the very front lines, working as a doctor in the tiniest, remotest villages, interacting with people that rising through the ranks up to the point where at the time I was making policy, national policy, and regional policy for several countries. I was able, more than I think most of my colleagues, to appreciate the missing links when operations don't go as planned. When I got to Liberia, I was saddled with the task of information management for some reason, I don't know. But, well, I think it made sense in the end. But before I went for that response, as my plane was approaching the city, I kept thinking to myself, in all these, it's commonly known in the humanitarian world that information management and coordination is a area that no one has really been able to find optimal solutions for. And there are many reasons for this. One of the key reasons, I think, is when there is a crisis and a disaster response, that's not the time to try new things. So people devolve to how it used to be done before. If you are sure that paper works, Why do you want to try a complicated new system during that time? And unfortunately, when there is no crisis, funding available for innovation is almost non-existent. So we find ourselves in the same repetitive cycle of doing things that we know where we're coming from is not the best. But at that point in time, it's the only thing we have to make use of. So as the plane approached Monrovia, I kept, will this be the same situation again? This time it was scarier because of what my head had feel about what the weather was going to be like. But I was hopeful that maybe there would be a different this time. As the plane approached, we landed in Monrovia Airport, I got into a car, and on the drive into town, I'm sorry, I missed it. Wonder how can I harmonize this and that? Okay, I'll do one mind, I'm sorry. Yeah, so just to draw your attention to Tim Berners-Lee, is considered the father of the internet. And that's what he had to say about data and data management. This was the scene. This is kind of what it looked like when I landed to join the Ebola response. It was really started. In a city of about 2 million people, by driving to town, the streets were empty. The few people on that you could see on the street were avoiding touching each other. The scene where you see that guy carrying up a little girl was common because those people that were tasked with the job of bringing in sick people had to dress head to toe in something like that. No parties, no public gatherings, people were not going to work. A US Army helicopter even was circling overhead 3 times a day, carrying out area patrols. The army was in full force, quarantine was enforced. Even though it was not a war situation, it reminded me of war because the city seemed to be really like a city and a society on the sea, truly. The smell of chlorine was everywhere because that's the solution that people were using to wash their hands on their feet. So every place had, every 2 steps or 10 steps you see, there were vats of chlorine for you to wash your hands and your feet in. I settled into my role as information management officer, and that's when it really became clear to me how dangerous siloed knowledge can be when you have packets of useful information. And again, this harks back to the very nature of how the humanitarian organogram is designed. You have several implementing agencies that have their own different ways of doing things. So you have people that know a lot about certain things, but it's not contributed to the collective. But I was information management officer for WHO. I was the youngest in the office then, so I think they gave it to me like a shitty detail, pardon my friend. Thinking nobody wants to do this. Let's just give the new guy. He doesn't know enough. He doesn't know how bad it is. But I come from a military background, so I don't see tasks as difficult. If you tell me to push down this wall, I'm not going to say it's impossible. I'm going to start trying to push. It doesn't fall down. It doesn't fall down. So I started trying to run around to gather information. I had to develop relationships up and down. But anyway, it taught me that it can be done, but it was sad that this information was stuck and wasn't being made available for people. Had to be reinventing the wheel on a daily basis, whereas somebody had already done the same thing a couple of days, a couple of weeks, a couple of months earlier. So that was one big lesson I learned. And because of the absence of a central network for coordinating local and expert knowledge, the response ran into a lot of problems. There was frustration on the part of the responders and on the part of the locals. It was a perfect storm because there were missed opportunities to be more effective in the response. We were frequently rediscovering what had been discovered before. And then rumors were around. People started spreading all kinds of rumors. For example, that's a prominent newspaper. That's a newspaper report, not something people were saying in their houses and their apartments, in the pub. These are the kinds of stories we're hearing. And before very long, something like this happened. It was riots and resistance. People that are trying to respond to the condition, which, I mean, is to be expected. When somebody dressed from head to toe in like a masquerade comes like this to your house and takes away your sister or your daughter. And in the early days, the case fatality rate for Ebola was close to 70%, meaning that for every 10 people that are taken for treatment, only 3 make it out. In the treatment centers, they are not open hospitals, they are walled off because it's a very contagious disease, so you don't want relatives to come in. They are fenced off. All you see from the outside looking in is people dressed like this. And then the government came up with a bullheaded policy that the dead body should be cremated, which is very alien to African culture, but they didn't do it good enough in telling people why this had to be the case. So someone comes to your house and takes away your sister or your daughter, and that's the last you ever see of her. And when they won't tell you she dies of a disease, you ask, where is the dead body? They're like, oh, we have to burn it. It was crazy. It led to resistance, it led to non-cooperation from the locals, from the people that are trying to help, it led to frustration on the part of the responders, and what should have been a 1 or 2 month event ended up going on for 2 years. I would like to say it's by design, but honestly it was by default. Eventually, when we tried, and despite the best efforts of the world's best in biology, in case management, just name it, we tried, but when everybody had failed, I think people started getting open to trying out new things, and collaboration started to occur more frequently, and the same data we had before was yielding better quality outcome because more people were contributing to delivering shared knowledge. Then we started to see a breakthrough, and eventually the outbreak came to an end. Some of the things that happened when we started collaborating more was the community started getting involved in messaging for the response. Medicine in general, and also Ebola, is, I think practitioners tend to focus a lot on the science of the disease without the humanity, because the host for any illness is a human being. And if you do not design your program in such a way that you must treat the person as well as the disease. And I would say our feeling in the early days was saying, okay, it's Ebola, we know how to take care of Ebola. You have to isolate the person, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do that. But what if a person refuses to be isolated? What do you do? Then all your knowledge and all your technical expertise just goes out the window. Except if that person's priest tells you, oh, if you want to isolate Melanie, for example, now, she earns daily salary. So you have to provide food for her on those days she gets isolated. That's the only way you get her to provide. But how would you know that if you are not someone that knows her and knows how she lives? So anyway, when community leaders, when priests and such started getting involved in the messaging and crafting the response strategies, contact tracing and all that, then we started to see breakthroughs. Women and youth groups got involved, communication specialists, anthropology specialists, technology people from companies in the West took a sabbatical. Some of them were paid, some were not paid, and came down there and started helping us with ideas and innovation and contributing innovation. And that's when we started to see the tide of the outbreak change. And just like Ebola, just like any other humanitarian crisis you see, it's basically the same thing that happens. Something that should not get out of hand gets out of hand, and then the same chaotic response ensues. I would like to say at the end, it became something you could actually be proud of. Was what I like to say a symphony of creativity and collaboration, because everyone was coming in the morning excited because then we actually now see results of our efforts. But unfortunately, while the outbreak raged, routine healthcare services were disrupted, schools stopped, more people died from regular sicknesses, and they couldn't get care than died from the outbreak itself. Why? Because hospitals became a ghost town. No one wanted to go to the hospital. Because in the early days, those that got sick at the hospital. That's one. Then two, Most of the healthcare staff had been diverted to the Ebola response, and there was no one to take care of them. So many more people died from an absence of healthcare services. The economies of the two countries collapsed. Schools were out for close to 9 months. Children were not going to school with all the attendant consequences. Well, perhaps the only good news from the tragic epidemic of Ebola in the last century is that it served as a wake-up call that we must prepare for future epidemics and diseases that may spread more effectively than Ebola will, than Ebola did. Although in the US, the CDC and various state and local health departments do a pretty good job in keeping Americans safe. But clearly, a threat in one place is a threat everywhere because people travel a lot nowadays. Food and drink supply chains stretch halfway across the world, and there's no guarantee that the weakening somewhere will not become a problem for people everywhere else. So we really need to be on guard. I put up 2 quotes. The most instructive one is the one by Bill Gates that he gave a speech and he also published in the New England Journal of Medicine that there is a significant chance. And when someone like that speaks, I think it's important that we pay attention to that. An epidemic of a substantially more infectious disease will occur sometimes in the next 20 years. In fact, of all the things that will kill more than 10 million people around the world, most likely it's an epidemic stemming from either natural causes or bioterror. So coordination underpins humanitarian and disaster response, information management underpins coordination. My first job I mentioned was information management during the Ebola response. And one measure of whether a new idea is powerful is when people adopt it under difficult situations. And like I said, when I first took on the role, it was considered a peripheral role. But after like 2 months, it was one of the more central roles in the country office. I was being consulted by people from Geneva, New York, Accra, where else we have. It became very central. People actually, when you prove that this is valuable, people want to know more. So increasingly now, humanitarian organizations they're investing a lot in improving ICT and information management capabilities. But I think more needs to be done. Tableau has been very active in that space. I don't know how many of us are familiar with Tableau, but they have been doing a lot. But that's, of course, you know what it is, data visualization. Imagine if we could visualize ideas, how cool would that be? Which brings us to exactly. Admittedly, I'm still trying to wrap my head around all the capabilities of community cities. And I mentioned this to the guys are exactly that. It's so powerful and so cool that I don't know how long it take me to do everything it can do. But from my standpoint right now, I think one of the most powerful use of community cities during a crisis response, during a humanitarian disaster, is functioning as a decision support system for decision makers. The points of useful information transcend what used to be traditional. Traditionally, we used to have very well educated people writing reports. But the community leaders are experts. The community are experts in themselves. When the community person sends you an SMS telling you about something, usually, the value of that information is just as valuable as a coordinator writing a situation report. So imagine if we could harness all those inputs coming from the field, from SMS, from informal meetings, from actual situation reports and all that, and it forms a coherent decision support system for those who make decisions at all levels. Imagine how cool that would be and how useful that would be. Another projected use of the cognitive cities is the refugees, livelihoods of refugees. So let me tell you my experience with refugees. Usually, when there's a large-scale crisis or forced displacement, people leave where they used to be and are forced into a smaller area. On that side of the screen, what you see is an aerial view of a place called Dadaab in Kenya. That refugee camp there has a population of like 700,000 people. And these people used to live somewhere before. Now, when there's a refugee crisis like that, you have responders all over the world going there to try and make their lives more comfortable. But among those people, you have doctors, you have engineers, you have coders, you have lawyers, you have restaurant owners. They used to be somewhere before doing something. How cool will it be if we could map out the skills of these people and use them to activate their livelihoods in their new location, depending when they go back to where they're coming from? Now, Dadaab has been in existence for well over 10 years. Usually, refugee camps start, and they usually last, in my experience, I've not seen anyone that lasted less than 5 years. So instead of staying there for 5 years, hopeless, and your life is passing you by, how cool will you be if a tool like community cities will map out their skills and use that to make them a productive community in a new location? How nice would that be? And next, last but not least, it says pharmaceutical R&D, but that's equivalent to how much is spent on R&D for NTDs, which are neglected tropical diseases. Ebola falls into that category, and other infectious diseases. Look at how tiny of a fraction is spent on R&D. So if cognitive cities, which I know is one of the capabilities, can help make that research and development more efficient, we can squeeze out more from the few dollars that are spent in that space. Now, there are obstacles to, like I said earlier, funding innovation is not usually a priority for the funders when there's not a crisis. Crisis opens pockets. When there's no crisis, they just tell you, oh, we'll do it later, keep that round down. So that's one of the obstacles. Anyone here that wants to engage in something like that can. But now is a great time for it. And the reason why I say so, there are several developments. Two things mainly. One is that in December last year, the USAID, which is one of the biggest funding agencies in the world, USAID stands for the United States Agency for International Development. They signed and established a new policy called the Private Sector Agreement, where they're going to be pushing more of their money not to the traditional spenders, but to people like you who have great ideas that can make the world a better place and are willing to follow a semi-market-based approach. They want to see products that help the world, not someone that promises that can take money. So that's one promising development. The second one is increasingly we see private money, private foundations, family foundations, willing to fund innovation, at least help you develop these things up to the point where when the crisis hits, you already have a mature and ready product. But those are two very promising developments, and I could go on and on. I think I'll just kind of stop here. But this is a great time for us here in OKC to start to engage and use the best of our skills to engage in humanitarian assistance and crisis response right here. Thank you.
Keep standing up there. We might have questions for you. So, yeah, not so fast. You're not off the hook yet. First of all, if Victor had not started his presentation by saying that he needed to force himself to develop the skills of public speaking, I would have assumed he had been public speaking for ages. That was a fantastic presentation. I also incredibly inspirational for me and hopefully for other members of my team. I think the message of trying to use technology to have an impact in this way. In 2001, I think it was, I saw a presentation by Edward Tufte, who's sort of early in my career in data visualization, and he showed many things, but one of the things he showed was how a different way of presenting information about the challenger, about what the engineers knew, about problems with O-rings and temperature might have averted the Challenger disaster. And that, that really stuck with me sort of early in my career, thinking that, wow, like nerdy engineers might have been able to save 7 people's lives if they'd been able to communicate better. Your talk really brought me back to that because it's a lot more than 7 lives. Thank you for that. Do people have questions?
Anything at all?
I just thought it was really enlightened, I guess, that you could imagine a scenario where you could scale that communication. I imagine going into a community of 2 million people, that seems like an impossible task, but I think you have figured out a solution that would make it possible.
Yeah, there's something I wanted to mention during the presentation was about, so towards the end of the response, after we had people that started recovery, I was nominated to lead the program for Ebola survivors, the mental health screening program, where we tried to gather all the survivors and test their blood and their semen for something to we're looking for. And most of those kind of programs have failed in the past, but one of the things we did at the start was that those who actually survived, regardless of their educational level, that we saw that were natural leaders in the community, I put them on the board of the program. Then all the employees were actual survivors themselves. And you won't believe the kind of insight we got from them. And when we're having a planning meeting and we're talking all kinds of science, let's tell you, this is what you should do. For example, when people come to clinic, give them rice, like feed them. And before you start feeding them, you're more or less forcing people to come get themselves checked. But that's that small thing. Who would ever think that? From my point is that the information that comes from the field, from the people, the affected people, is so valuable. We need to devise a way to capture it in a way that gives as much weight, almost, as those that are bringing technical power.
So at the time that this was going on, I was working for public health in the state of New Hampshire. I remember seeing a lot of different estimates and others trying to understand what the obstacles were. In early days, they were saying that there was a real problem with getting money flowing, and there was poor cooperation amongst the international community deciding how money would be spent, making sure that if they did put money towards that, it would be spent effectively. And they had some, I remember seeing some estimates that they couldn't get the money flowing by a certain point in time that the crisis would become out of hand, and millions of people would die. By the end of it, it wasn't millions of people, but it was containment. And I'm wondering how that information from the ground flowed up to such a high level, or if that was really, it could be that wasn't a real problem at all. It is just the perception or somehow that information got disseminated. I have no idea how to validate that and understand.
Yeah.
So there's a massive scale of being on the ground all the way up to governments moving money and understanding that flow of information is really challenging.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's challenging to balance the money coming down and the very grassroots, because often what the funders want and what the affected communities want is mostly, well, not mostly, but often different. But the scaremongering for Ebola in my view was quite unnecessary. I don't fully know the details of why that happened, because I was on ground there where there were meetings where there was fight, because one agency is saying 3,000 cases by Friday, and the other agency is like, what are you guys talking about? We're not going to have more than maybe 10 or 100 or a couple of hundred. So that's a very controversial thing. But we learned from it to use to adjust the parameters we use for modeling. But truth be told, the CDC was estimating doomsday scenarios. Euro surveillance was saying there would be 500,000 new cases. Perhaps to open up wallets of, like I said, people that were not funding. But I can guarantee you there was a point where we had no money that we could use. Because everybody just realized once somebody landed in Dallas and it was missed, and somebody landed something like money just started flowing. You know, and on the scale of it, how much, just a couple of billion were spent in the response, which unfortunately the fraction was spent in the healthcare system.
Well, that's cool. Okay, so I kind of want to dive more into the how do you start that conversation of getting different perspectives when you're in that crisis? Like, how did that happen, and what technologies were you using? Because you started with pen and paper, and then you ended with like, can you go more into detail about it?
Well, it's a mix of strategies. The most important and the first step is engagement. And letting them know that you're on their side. I'm not going to come to your community and act like I'm coming from a different world just to tell you what to do and to do, or to ask you for something. I have to solve your problem. So, for example, before Ebola, I worked in that country before after the Civil War. So, one of the first things I did when I got there was to start meeting my old contacts and establishing friendship with them. Even though people were scared to visit, how they were taking their house and things like that. But that being said, to your question, you give people what they want, and they'll give you what you want. So the community is not particularly, people that will give information are not particularly interested in whether Ebola is not from the start, because in the first instance, some of them don't believe there's Ebola. But if their problem is their kids cannot get to school, you tell them, you know what, let's quarantine your location for 21 days. After 21 days, there's no new case. You can reopen the schools. So that gets them to act in your interest for your self-interest. When people, I remember people that I convinced to send me info using SMS, I was giving them airtime. So if I give them $10 airtime and they spend $5 sending me data, you can use the $5 to call them. Things like that. Knowing how to align incentives and realizing, knowing for sure that incentives are different for different people. Incentives for the funders are different than for those that will give you what you want on the ground. Does that answer?
No, definitely. How do you just organize all this information? Is really,
Well,
I feel like that's a huge organizational
it is.
issue.
My grandfather always said, like, how do you eat an elephant? Don't cram both, you take it piece by piece. But there's power in numbers. Imagine one person can eat an elephant compared to 100 people, 100 men around.
Yeah.
So just doing it in a decentralized but organized fashion. And one of the great things I forgot to mention when I talk is scaling. When you do things from the start, the mind to scale. You're going to rigorously document your steps, making it easier for somebody else to replicate it in the short. So once an idea is adopted by the majority, it can scale very fast when it starts. And that happens many times.
I have a couple of questions, and you kind of answered some of them right now. Thinking from an implementation standpoint, based on your experience with information management, you have the technologies available. How do you get people to use it? And you've got the training, you got to make sure that people are aware of it, they have to know how to do it. How would you go about implementing that?
You go implementing that without any preconceptions. You go in there with your tools and understand that you're going to learn how to implement it while you are there. Prepare yourself with the best tools available and the best knowledge of what you want to achieve. But how you achieve it is different for every scenario. And that's the mistake I think a lot of technical people make. They think one size fits all approach will work. And those are the base of the pyramid. Really, it isn't. Most times, people's people's needs run more towards the most basic things. Food, kids, the basic needs of life. So, for example, on a nutrition standpoint, it's designed for what you have. It depends on what you want. Let me just so that I can find an example for you now. If you want data from 20 villages, you have to go to those 20 villages or pay someone to go there for you. Then identify who is most likely to send these data, not just a random person, and not necessarily the person holding an office, but who is interested. Who can you motivate to do it for you? Who can you tell? Who can you make believe that doing this thing will enhance your own ability to get a better job tomorrow because you're exposed to technology, so things like that. So from a documentation standpoint, in summary, there's no one-size-fits-all approach. It has to be something that you have to learn, prototype rapidly in the field, and iterate. But when you do it intentionally and you do it well, you can scale very quickly after that.
Okay, and then thank you, that was helpful. And then my second question is, at the beginning of your presentation, you showed some fake news article, misinformation that was being spread. How would you keep the technology from allowing people to put misinformation in that? How would you contain that?
Isn't the best solution to bad information, good information? If, for example, the priests and the imams and the community leaders had been in the rooms when the messaging was being formed, that man in the yellow suit will have been accompanied by the chief of that village, who will go in first and tell them, hey, your daughter is being taken for treatment. You can't go with her because it's infectious. If you go with her, you'll be a danger to the rest of us. She will be taken care of. This is what happens inside there. Your daughter may die, but she's getting the best care. Then he leads her out, or after he does that, the man in the yellow suit goes in. There will have been less room for misinformation or bad information. But when someone just rushes in there in the yellow suit to carry a girl out, and she's never seen again, fake news happens in a vacuum. That will always be bound to happen. But if the best ideas were getting marked and seen and used, we will have known very early that the reason for resistance is because of those rumors and things like that. I don't know if that answers your question.
And I have one more question that was done. You mentioned earlier, you made a statement that it's hard to get funding when there isn't a crisis in action. So is there any way that you could think of to get funding for this where it could be applied in other scenarios where businesses would want to invest in it for their personal gain and be able to use that for these other crisis situations?
Yeah, I wish, but so private money, I think, is picking up some of the slack. Bill Gates is doing great work in that regard. He has a philanthropy roundtable, and there's something called the Giving Pledge, and you have all kinds of. First of all, the great idea is that his friends and family have first started funding before he started institutional money. But I'm not sure if I had a good answer for that. I probably wouldn't be here right now. Probably be somewhere implementing my ideas. But I think it's a slog, it's a daily struggle. But some policies that are making it more friendly, easier to get that kind of money. I think it's now one of them is the BSI, public sector, and maybe they can have some impact.
So this was my brain was thinking about this too. Like I found this to be, it sort of sounds obvious when you say it, like there's no money if there isn't a crisis. And then I actually thought the second half was also insightful that like when there is a crisis, there's money, but no one's willing to take a risk because you're in crisis mode. So you don't use that money in like innovative ways. So you get this catch-22. I feel like my team may feel like that sometimes. Like I don't give them room to do certain types of development unless I owe it to a customer yesterday. We can do the development, but we can't do it the way they wanted to do it. So anyway, I think this is like I can really identify with that challenge. What you're sort of saying, like, so can we get other people to fund it? What that just made me think of is, to the extent that everybody has like at any given point in time, there's probably some population in some field, not necessarily humanitarian crisis, but there's probably always a crisis going on at some point in time, right, in some field, that probably benefits from some of these similar ideas of like engaging multiple stakeholders, leveraging information on the ground, building consensus, all this stuff. And I wonder to what extent, some creative thinking and sort of recognizing that, a financial crisis or a climate crisis, and we'll put Derek on the spot in a second, that we have other types of crises, and maybe they're not exactly the same, but maybe they provide opportunities to unlock some funding to start to put together certain pieces of the puzzle. And so, there's members here, that work at Exaptive, so they know the Exaptive mission, and there's other people that maybe are not as familiar, but like the whole concept of exaptation is taking something in one domain and figuring out how to apply it somewhere else. And so when you were thinking, I kept thinking about climate, because so Derek, I'm gonna pass the microphone to you in a second. Okay. So Derek works in climate science, which is a crisis unfolding on a slower timescale, but with potentially even bigger consequences in a single outbreak. And I just think there's a lot that probably resonates. And so I was going to ask you, like, when you see this talk, what do you see in the climate book?
But I'm gonna have to look at the recording again because everything you said, I pretty much could align it with the climate science researchers down to stakeholders on the ground that need information about climate and the future about change, and for planners like farmers or emergency managers or city planners. And so I could fill in your words with like our people, our process. It's just that ours is a longer process. Yours is a very fast, quick action. But I had a question tied to is that, they both, you have to prepare for them ahead of time. So you're doing a similar thing, but I was gonna say here that it's so perfect because you can, we'll write it out together. But I saw that it was related the same because you have to go out and the people on the ground have to believe it. Climate is changing, or know it is, and then know how it will affect them, and you have to convince them of that, and then you have to see, they have to decide what to do to plan for the future, which for climate is just a long process. This is very, very good short term, but the process itself, I think, is going to be, actually the thing is, using the cognitive city is going to be specifically the same. It's just, you're inputting different things and you're outputting different things. So I think it's perfect. I think it's a very good analogy.
So, yeah, for those of you that aren't familiar with the cognitive city concept, the idea is we've used technology societally to create lots of networks connecting people together, and we tend to call those social networks. We have LinkedIn, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, we have Twitter. Like, these are all technological platforms that can connect lots of people together, even if they're not physically in the same place, that connect lots of people together without them potentially transmitting diseases, which has a benefit, and also is sort of a level playing field in terms of who you connect. Like, if you have internet access, we have anyone who has a phone can be on Twitter, and CEOs and presidents can be on Twitter. Like, it levels the playing field from that perspective. That's not good. So get back on track. Okay, but but the problem I see with those is that we call these social networks, and I'm all like, I like being social. I'm a social person, but like what Victor's talking about is not like trying to use a network to just help people share their photos and likes and dislikes, and so the vision of a cognitive network, of a cognitive city, is to try and use the technological tools of social networking for sort of mission-driven purposes that aren't just about being social. They're about containing disease outbreak, or they're about doing research on climate, or they're about a programming team trying to have more innovative sort of use of data science. So that's what we sort of mean by a cognitive city. I thought And I mean, the basic idea is if you get a lot of people together, you should be able to use that to produce new ideas, not just to produce advertising. Like mostly we use technology right now to get people, to get a critical mass of people together. And as soon as we hit critical mass, we say now it's enough that we can monetize through advertising. You know, what I'm interested in is can we get the critical mass of people together and say that, you know, the value that comes out of it isn't the value of a captive audience for your ads, it's the value of an activated population for solving problems. So, sorry, not to try and be on a soapbox on that, but it's like some people are familiar with that vision and some people aren't. And I think going back to what, you know, Derek's saying and the question you're bringing up, like how do we solve this funding problem, is that, you know, if we can find some parallel crises that are sort of unfolding on different time frames that have a more diversified portfolio of funding. I mean, there are people that are funding climate science now because they feel like it is in the crisis mode now. And there may be some other examples of that as well. If we can, it makes it interesting to think about using some of that funding. Like, I wonder if you could piggyback, if you could get some of these other institutions or USAID and things like that to sort of piggyback and say, okay, we don't have an active humanitarian crisis like Ebola, but we want to be prepared for one. So let's use climate. And it's not exactly an apples to apples comparison, but it's close enough, and we can prove some things out. And if we engage other stakeholders that do have experience in the humanitarian side to sort of help us know what's applicable and what's not, can we be, you know, incrementally more prepared for the next time? That's really fascinating to me, and I feel like we should think about how to try and propose something like that. And in general, this idea that you talked about the value of rapid prototyping, but frequently we think about rapid prototyping like in the specific environment that we're trying to deal with, right? Like it's sort of interesting to think about prototyping for one domain in a different domain because it might be more in vogue at that moment. There's a lot to think about there, so I'm just thinking out loud. Does anyone have any thoughts or comments on that? Yeah.
So I'm thinking so for us, it's what research do you fund? What's the funding? Where does the money go to researchers that will help with problem stakeholders? And so that's where does the funding get to the people that need it. So those decisions are being made, but you can't just you need a connection with these translators and people that actually know. I'd like to comment that you've been going in there and keep the village for us that if they're going to go into a conservative region of the country or something, you don't want to go to research scientists, you know, and their research with their code. You bring in a local pastor, or you have research scientists who are Christian conservatives that go out and interact with people to get them to be prepared for things that might happen in the future. So for us, it's trying to find out ways to connect these groups or to connect where does the money flow and where does it go and where do you focus. So it's very nice, a very nice parallel that you have. And so for us, it's a lot bigger stakeholder that needs it. There's all these different examples, and for crisis situations, there's not as many out there, but so you document the ones that can be inserted into the city. But I feel like you could identify decision makers or decision, slot a certain type of person in certain different fields, different ways of utilizing the city. I think it's good. But all right.
We'll pass this to you, so I didn't.
Like, couldn't you just use clout, which already tells you, like, rates your, like, social media, kind of tells you how much clout you have amongst your friends, and then use and implement the social media networks that are already there? Because it seems like the stream, and I could be wrong, but it just seems like the stream through all of this is, how do we connect this technology and this information with the social side of people, with the side of people that are like, I don't know if I'm gonna trust everything I read on the internet, because while I could use Twitter to talk about my sandwich, or I could use Twitter to talk about 50 missing girls in Ghana. Like, there's, like, what are the, I just, like, how do you, maybe I lost my train of thought, but I just feel like there's so much already out there that already exists, and it's just finding that thread, right? Like, how do you connect the social people, the clout that people have with these technologies, get them to understand, and then I don't even want to use this term, but I'm going to trickle down this information to the masses. I'm a terrible.
Really?
The biggest thing we've learned in the time field is that, yeah, trickle down is what the way it used to work. When scientists produce a bunch of stuff, throw it out there. It goes down to the people that need it. And you find it doesn't work. You have to, so you're talking about the social side, which I would say is the stakeholder, the human, the component, the people that use information, need money. That's already been established with the social networks that's out there. It's just we use it in a stupid way to just have fun, right? And so the thing is, on the research side, we as climate scientists, especially now, are realizing our information isn't in the network. We have all this information, we have all these tons and thousands of journal papers, research and data sets. They're sitting on servers and supercomputers at universities. And so that's not, it's not in the system, it's not out there. And so the thing is, we have information that could be helping someone right now, could be helping a farmer in Iowa. It's just they're not connected. So the biggest thing is you need a two-way street where there's information flow. And so it is, this person that isn't just looking at either, this person is just throwing stuff on there. It has to be active, and we think it's human beings in between.
No, we're on the same page here. So it's how do we identify that person who has enough clout that that someone trusts them enough to say, this is the information, and I believe it because it's coming from this trusted source. Like, what's gonna make me trust this technology? Because I feel like Twitter can get out all this information, and it has, but I don't trust Twitter because also, like, we have anti-vaxxers.
I think we just don't have that trusted source yet. This is actually pretty apropos because what we're going to do in April for Data Plus Creativity, and I should preface this by like, there is a community that's interested in getting involved that isn't scientists, just scientists, like professional trained scientists. And there are citizen scientists now, and there's a lot more connectivity. They do have the internet, they can find information, and there's a much bigger, I think, interest in the general population about getting involved, having not just being a stakeholder, but being an influencer. And April, we're going to be watching, I want to have another 100 movie nights now. And we're going to watch a short documentary hackathon that we actually filmed here. And after the hackathon, we're going to invite people to run a Data Plus Creativity Hub City, where we can start identifying those experts or community people who are engaged. We'll talk about inviting people to propose ideas for hackathons. I think it sounds like a great initial idea to incorporate the climate science and do a hackathon about climate science and how we can get more people involved and we'll talk about that in April. I think there's interest, but I don't know that we have a trusted source yet that would be widely accepted as a vetting.
I just wanted to add to that what questions, the mentor of mine used to always say the quality of questions. Questions are better than answers. Once you start asking the right question, you're on your way to an answer. So right now, I'm very confident with not knowing the answer many times. Because if you know all the answers then, the quality of the question will be guiding you most times the answer. So if you ask that question, when you ask it, I'm inspired because I didn't have an answer for it. But that doesn't mean I'm inspired because I know that once we start engaging together, we find an answer.
I similarly think that this is like the right question to ask, and that it's not it's not a binary answer. You know, your question originally was like, don't we have this already, which is sort of a yes or no question. I think that the reality is that we have aspects of this, and that there's other aspects that are, like, we have aspects of systems that already exist that work really well for this sort of things. And then we have other aspects which don't. And so, like, doing that gap analysis, I think, is the key. So, for example, the Arab Spring was really facilitated by Facebook. And so I think that is sort of like an affirmative, like that supports your point that, hey, we already have this already. Like, clearly the system in place through Facebook was already sufficient to be able to like rally revolution, right? And part of that is that one of the challenges in revolution, I think this is like Steven Pinker quote or something, is that common knowledge is not the same as knowledge of commonality. So, like, if everybody knows that the president is corrupt, that's common knowledge. But that's different than everybody knowing that everybody thinks the president is corrupt, which is knowledge of commonality, right? And so that's part of the reason that dictators control the media, because everyone might be thinking the same thing, but if they don't know everyone's thinking the same thing, they don't feel confident to have an uprising. And that was the thing that Facebook really sort of broke through, is it became a lot easier to have for common knowledge to turn into like knowledge of commonality. But the thing that I think is interesting there is that Facebook was not designed with that purpose in mind. So the fact that it worked doesn't necessarily mean that it was the best tool for the job. It was just a tool for the job. And so the thing that I find myself curious about is, like, now that we know, it sort of goes with that rapid prototyping, like, now that we know that social networks are good for accelerating revolution against regimes, if you were to invent Facebook all over again, only for the purpose of supporting revolutions against corrupt regimes, what different features would you put? Would it become more important to put in, you know, would geolocation tagging take on a different meaning? Would you, you know, like, what would you do differently? And so I think that that's the thing I sort of get excited about, is that we have, you know, and you brought up, like, trust is a good example. Like, we have systems that are very good at establishing trust for commerce, because we've had a lot of incentive through Amazon and eBay and things like that to try and develop a lot of good tools for helping somebody understand if they can buy something from somebody else. We don't have nearly the same set of tools for helping somebody understand if they can trust the news they just retweeted. And so I sort of feel like the answer is yes and no. Like, we've had success, so we know that we're on the right track. We know that, I feel like technologically the answer is yes. Like, I think technologically we can connect people, we can build reputations, we can elevate some people in trust, and we can block other people, you know, that lose reputation, and like technologically we have that. But culture, you know, but for these sort of particular purposes that aren't commerce or like becoming a taste maker, you know, which I think is a term, like, what would be different? What would be different if we were trying to optimize it for them? I don't have, you know, that, like, I'm sort of devoting my, you know, the whole rest of my career at Exaptive is devoted to trying to answer that question. And I would really welcome, you know, anybody who has any insight about that, like, let us know.
Because like Facebook wasn't just for broad media, it was for colleges, to connect with smaller people, and then it became what it is. And Instagram created lifestyle influencers, and it became what it's become, because that's how we did culturally. So wouldn't it just be more of a function that we would want to put trust in tastemakers who want to solve climate change, tastemakers who want to solve the world crisis.
I'm trying to draw it, 'cause this is what I've been thinking about, and I'm thinking about it now, it's thinking about if this is a blowout here of either information or money or whatever it is, it's going somewhere. And we're talking about this big population of the masses down here, which Facebook connects everyone, right? So that's, all this information is flying around here. You mention your friends, and so that's who you talk to, it's all over here. What I see, thinking about the Project City and what exactly doing is that what climate is an example. You don't need to get everybody. You need to get its core leaders, its core networks and flow of information. And so if you think about, I'm thinking, it's actually like, think about the climate, there's like, pick your that's the farmer, your agency that controls stuff with market farming, the cities with, well, pick all of them. So we have these lines coming down from the information or money going to the population. And so what the city does, what this does is it actually finds what are those connections, how can that flow best? And all you need is a few people at these core places. So we know there's people that want this information. There's people that will never, don't agree with it, but if you get a core piece of that community working with it, understanding it, believing it, it'll fill in. So it's almost like bypassing Facebook because you're dropping in information that's real from trusted sources. And that's what I see. Yeah. Okay.
No, I think there's like a fundamental thing here, which is I think that I'm not convinced that the term influential, I think, there's subtlety there. And that the systems we built today are based on what I think is like a seductively dangerous conflation of influence with like prevalence. So the social networks we have today reward quantity over quality. What, like, the definition of a tastemaker, the definition of an influencer is just someone that has more connections than everybody else. That's it. And so, like, it's not very nuanced. We have no way of knowing what people do based on those things. So if you tweet something and people go out and shoot somebody as a result, that doesn't get tracked. Like, what gets tracked is how many people retweeted your tweet. So that's kind of what I'm getting at, which is like, when we create systems, every system is a game, and then people will play that game. And the games we've created right now are trying to get the most friends, the most likes, the most connections on LinkedIn, the most retweets. And I think that's dangerous because, I mean, look, I like sugar, and like what it does is it creates a sort of like, sex sells, sugar sells, and we're sort of creating systems that I think reward, like, giving people a dopamine hit in the shortest number of characters to get our scores up. And I don't think that's gonna cure Ebola. That's actually gonna reward that sort of incendiary, Ebola was genetically engineered from AIDS. It's like people respond to that. That's gonna get more retweets than anything else. And we can't, if we build systems that just reward that, that's the metric. I think it's scary. You have a thought?
I was just gonna say, like, I think it's kind of what LinkedIn has done in the social media thing has been to replicate what Facebook has done with likes and what Twitter has done with retweets and stuff like that. I think it's like, as I've been on my LinkedIn feed, I've noticed it's less and less about jobs and more just about like followers and that sort of thing. It's become kind of the same old network, the same old thing. So whatever this does become needs to have that, establish that trust, and have those figures that, have some kind of clout for reasons. I don't know. That was just my only thought.
So rewarding the right things.
Yeah, something that isn't about, like you're saying, like likes, isn't about like retweets or how many people follow you.
Yeah, like the term clout is the right term, and it's what you were, I think when you talked about bringing priests in or bringing like the head of the village or something like that, like, so I'm curious, I'm gonna sort of push this back to you now, which is, like, in your experience, you must have seen this incredible spectrum of types of people, you know, from the scientists to the politicians to the priests and things. And some of those people had more clout, and some had less clout, and some may have had more clout in like a positive way and maybe some negative. When you reflect on that, do you see like types of people or types of characteristics that you say that are sort of like correlated to, you know, positive influence? Oh, yeah.
Let's see. I'm just going to have stream of thought here because I haven't thought about it before. But then in my experience, there's positional influence and then acquired influence. So some have influence by virtue of the position they hold, like the chief of the village has influence. The head of the village in the country has influence. But depending on the situation, some people also have influence depending on the situation. Like if we're in the office and my boss is the head of the office, the head of the village, the head of this, he has influence in the office. But if we're playing basketball, for instance, he may not have influence on the basketball court. So in like an Ebola, in an epidemic and infectious disease outbreak, the nurse in the village hospital will have more influence than the chief when it comes to healthcare matters. For like a refugee situation now, maybe the guy when they were rounding up people that showed them the way out, if you identify that person, you may have more influence than anybody else who has any kind of position of authority. So again, I'm not sure that answers your question, but not a one-size-fits-all approach. I think if it's using a social network example, it's to measure know what to measure and measure it at the start, so that you can know those people that are having positive, those that are posting selfies or posting things that promote a value that you are not trying to promote in a network. You may try to see them, measure them against those that are promoting things that are positive and want to see more. Then find a way to promote or reward those kinds of behaviors and less. For example, let me just give you an example from Facebook now. On Facebook, when I post something positive like a message, you know, something I read somewhere that inspired me, maximum like 20 likes, 30 likes. But if it's a picture with me, like in a posh place, doing some posh thing, or when I drove a Tesla, 500 likes. So if the network rewards, if Facebook promotes the positive messages and doesn't show you so much of the big baller messages, maybe more people will, because everybody likes to see those likes. So I think that's the easiest analogy I find.
I was intrigued by one thing that kind of stuck out to me in the middle of your presentation. The story that began circulating about Ebola being their agent. Struck me as something I'd seen recently about the way that Russian intelligence uses fake news and has for decades. They're the ones that started the story about the CIA creating AIDS when this escaped. And it made me wonder if this is an ongoing practice, this is even from today, it's largely behind a lot of what's happening on Facebook. If you watch the PBS programs on the Facebook, I should. But it made me wonder if that story that popped up about Ebola and germ warfare was a fake news story planted by bad actors. They do that just in order to destabilize governments that they want to destabilize. Does that play into this conversation?
Yeah, in this case, it's both. There are times when foreign postal intelligence agencies plan fake news or plan propaganda to destabilize governments. But they also plan times when someone with a very active imagination just sees a chain of events. Some of the steps in the chain are opaque and fills in the blanks. From the point of view of someone in the village, all you saw is that some people came, don't know them. It wasn't Naomi that lives next door, is someone that came from another country, maybe Caucasian in a predominantly black country. All you see are just around the eyes. You don't see anything else. Dressed from head to toe, doesn't really speak to you, acts fearful, transmits that fear to everybody else around, and escort your person, almost not touching them, into a van, into a walled off place where no one is allowed to go into. All the people working in there, none of them are from the village. But they told you it's a hospital. Meanwhile, there are hospitals in the hospital, village and the town. And the people that work there come home at the end of the day and you know them. Those working in this place, you don't see them because at the end of the day, they enter their vehicles and go to their hotels because they're temporary residents like myself. Then the person dies and you don't even get to bury the body. The body is cremated and they tell you, oh, so as the person died, that's what happened. So it's only natural that someone with active imagination who perhaps read one story one day that the West wants to reduce the number of people because Africa is overpopulated or something, or who hears that many old people are dying in the West and need organ transplants. We'll just say those people are being harvested to feed the black market in organs. And once it tells one person, then it just starts to spread. And like Dave said, people like to hear certain kinds of information. And in the absence of good information, bad information has better impact.
That's definitely true. I guess in terms of like spam media and stuff like that, I don't know if I was listening to Planet Money or The Indicator, but that's all real. The just named generic Washington something for some sort of website. Like, I think they quoted it like you're making $76,000 a year making fake news. Like that's out there. That's real. It's nuts. It's like I guess it hurts my stomach to think that like some people would put themselves in like.
Sorry to add to your question. Yeah, we eventually found out that some politicians were promoting some of these rumors to discredit the existing government. So these things, yeah, happened. The opposition party was saying the government needed money or something, and that's why they're using people. So some crazy thing like that.
And I think it might be good to note that the thought process of what we developed, it definitely isn't like Facebook. So the information we're talking about isn't going to be people typing information on themselves and having fun. It's farmer in an arid region, it's this much rainfall, but things like those. So the information input into the system, it will be what kind of researcher or what kind of which agency is going to provide funding for an outbreak. And it's information that it's not a social type of area. So you're not. I think we're talking two separate things. It's not what you're going to hopefully create is something that will help in preparation so that when something happens, you have something in place. But when it's not supposed to provide people information as it's happening, is that true? Right? I mean, it's yeah.
Well, I'll chime in on that.
My
Yeah, go
question is about, you talked about information which is on servers. Right, I assume we're talking about, obviously there's a lot of studies that are published. Some of them are published in public publications, which everyone can access. Some of them are published in journals, which you can only access if you are a subscriber. And some of them are just, master's and doctoral theses, which are sit on university servers. They're never published anywhere, but they're there, and they could be useful for someone. So I think about those things, we're talking kind of about rights, authorship rights, and about, server bandwidth to make all of these studies available that haven't been published elsewhere, but might be useful for somebody else. Is that a good summation?
The network that we are looking to is going to lot of people with information and people that information is slow. So it's not that some person is on the journal access, it's that the information from that journal will people run through minds, other organizations, communication, disseminates it, and we would be disseminating that information at the agency, who would they have their contact from. So it's just connected to streams, so that there is a journal paper as a consider it's useful, some science finds it, because this is useful for this type of application, it ends up flowing through the app and it's seen through the form. But the problem is what it that came from this journal, but the network itself will identify that stream so that it can make it. It's a little more complex than that, but it's
Yeah. So I have a couple of thoughts. One is that Victor's been standing up here for us too.
I know.
But I think that that's a great, I think that's a great sign. Like when I, started this, I said the hope is that this isn't just, a lecture to an audience, but it's a conversation with the community. And this actually makes me really happy to see the types of conversations that come up. And it's, once we let them sit down again, there's lots of food over there, and people should continue to have, these conversations or these side conversations, or come and talk to him. I think, there's a parting thought that I was just reflecting on hearing in a number of the questions, and I think one of the things that you said and it really stuck with me was this idea that like fake news exists. Fake news is sort of allowed into a vacuum. Like when you have a vacuum, you're creating a space for these sort of other things to happen. And maybe we can argue with that, and that's an oversimplification, but I do think that there's a lot of power in thinking about like when there's a vacuum, you sort of leave yourself open to allowing other things to fill the space that maybe aren't what you intended. And the thing that I sort of find myself thinking as a theme in Derek's work and in the work that you presented today, and like when I think about social networks that are less prone to fake information, like I think about Wikipedia, it actually does a really good job of having, quality information instead of disingenuous information. The theme that seems to run through all those things is that those communities, like whether it's the climate community or the Ebola response community or the Wikipedia community, they have a goal, they have an aim. In a way that I don't feel, I'm just thinking this through for the first time, but I don't really feel like Facebook has an aim. And I think that like when the aim was a bunch of Egyptians trying to understand, what was happening in their own community, it actually worked really well, So that, I sort of found myself thinking about that is like when we have a vacuum, not just a vacuum of information, but a vacuum of shared goal, then all kinds of weird stuff, can fill that. But what's sort of encouraging is it seems like, we have these really, when crises come up, we get a goal. Or Wikipedia wasn't filling a crisis, it was just people saying, hey, here's a goal that we should all work together, and then technology was really effective in helping that. And so, so I want to, maybe we'll just close with sort of thinking about that, and I think, we would love, over the course of we would love for these meetups to be opportunities once a month to sort of come together and think about different shared goals that this community has, that our experience with the broader world, illuminates for us, and how data, creativity, technology can sort of move us all towards those goals. So thank you for coming, and take pizza home if you're not going to eat it. It always goes to waste if we don't, and feel free to stay and talk more if you want to. So thank you, and a big